Sorry about that. I guess YouTube limits how much you can record or something. I'm not really sure. But I have to do this in two parts now. But we don't have much left to go. So we're talking about the magician and the scientist. Both of them want to conquer nature. Both of them want to use nature. The magician uses the matter of the world in order to have power over it so that he can have some supernatural effect. The scientist does the same thing, and this is C.S. Lewis's point, that science and magic are not so far apart as people think they are. Both of them have the same goal of using nature for some end other than itself. People generally think that in the Middle Ages, magicians were everywhere, and that it was a very magical kind of time, but that's not really the case. He says that historically, the kind of rise of the magicians happened at the same time as the rise of the scientific era, in the 18th century, in the 19th century, than it was in the Middle Ages themselves. Whereas the ancients desired to know nature by conforming their minds to nature, magicians and scientists desire to use it for power. So one of the points that C.S. Lewis makes, and this is one of the last points that I'm going to make, is that we talk about subjective experience today in kind of not the best light, especially among kind of younger Catholics. And this whole time we've been talking about the Tao, natural law, objective reality, us conforming ourselves to objective reality, and all that is absolutely true. But there's obviously a subjective experience of the world that we have to take seriously. It is that subjective experience of the world that really makes us human. We're not merely robots that just kind of perceive the world and in a rationalistic way just immediately understand it. We perceive it, and when we perceive it, we appreciate it, and we appreciate it because we notice that there's value in it. We don't value things merely because we're told to value things, although that can be part of the formation of the soul. But we value things because we have this kind of felt, immediate, intuitive response to nature, and that is a healthy thing. That is subjective, but it's also healthy, and it's healthy to cultivate that. It's no accident or fantasy that truth and goodness and evil and beauty and ugliness and all these things are experienced by human beings. So it doesn't mean to have a subjective experience of the world isn't something merely arbitrary or merely relative. That's kind of how it's taken these days. But it just means that we are subjects that are perceiving the world, that are perceiving something. So Aristotle talks about this actually in physics. Yes. Where he asks a question, if a tree falls to the floor and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Well, it doesn't make a sound. I suppose that it makes a sound objectively, but if nobody is there to hear it, it doesn't really make a sound according to our definition of sound. Because for a tree to fall on the floor and make a sound, it has to be heard by somebody. That's what we call a sound, when it is heard by a subject. And so it is subject and object, the relation between subject and object, that truth is found, that reality is found. This is also expressed in the book of Genesis, when God creates the world day after day, and he says God saw that it was good. It's because God saw it. It's because God spoke it into existence, and God saw it, that the day was completed when God saw it. And it's God seeing it, God's perceiving it, that made it what it is. So the Tao, natural law, first principles, however you want to call it, contains truth, and people subjectively perceive and conform themselves to it. We have to have this relationship between object and subject for a thing to be real, for a thing to be true. So that's going to conclude my going over this second part of the Abolition of Man with you guys. We can discuss it more in person because there's a lot of things to talk about here, but we're also going to be discussing T.S. Eliot's The Four Quartets. So please have that read by next week, which is the last week. Remember that you don't have to do a paper for one of those 3-page papers for T.S. Eliot, but you just have to do the final paper, the details which you can find on the syllabus. If you have any questions, please bring them to class on Thursday, or you can always email me and we can discuss your question. God bless you all, and hope you've enjoyed this book.